What's up, duelists? Last weekend in North Carolina, there was a $2,000 Edison format tournament. I'm going to be covering the top 4 deck lists from this tournament. I'm going to be showcasing those. I mentioned this, I think, in a community post. I don't know if you guys caught the stream. I didn't really get a chance to watch the stream, so I don't really know what happened. This is going to be one of my first times looking at, the vibe, looking at the deck list, seeing what's up here. So the first deck list I see here is Hero Beat. This is a bit different than some of the Hero Beats we've seen in the past. It is not necessarily a bad change, I think. I think that they've trimmed on a lot of the cards that can be kind of underwhelming in multiples, like Ocean, Miracle Fusion, Ken Brick, especially when you're on main deck Royal Oppression like they are. And Cyber Dragon, of course, is dead after you draw the first one. So they've trimmed on a lot of the cards that you can dead draw in multiples, which I think is not necessarily a bad way to build your deck. That being said, only having one water can sometimes get tricky, but you only have 2 Miracle Fusions, so even if your water gets banished, it's not the end of the world if you have a couple dead Miracle Fusions in your deck. It'd have to be like you draw your Elemental Hero Ocean, it gets banished, and then you draw back-to-back Miracle Fusions, which is pretty unlikely, so it's not too bad. I do like that they've gone for the max number of main deck Floodgates that you can play. Skill Drain and Royal Oppression are both semi-limited, which is nice. They're on 1 Road, 1 Bribe. Road doesn't do the best job of protecting Oppression, because if you try to protect Oppression with your Road, they'll just Oppression negate the Road. So yeah, that makes sense. Compulsory Evacuation Device is a card I've loved in this deck for a really long time. I think it's super good in these types of hyper-aggressive decks, and I actually really do like the Captain Gold Skyscraper package. I think it improves this deck's matchup into a lot of different things. Main deck Thunder King can be a little bit awkward. I'm not really sure why they elected to go with Thunder King over, like, let's say Ocean, Future Fusion, something like that. I think those cards are generally speaking a little bit better, because Future Fusion Send Ocean Alias can immediately turn on your Hero Blast, which can be another card that breaks earlier in the game. So I don't really know if Thunder King's better or worse. I just know that, like, they chose to do it and they got top 4, so that's pretty cool. They won a sizable chunk of change. Sideboard's pretty straightforward. Shadow Mirror, Light Mirror, extra copies of Skill Drain in the matchups that they matter. Mask of Restrict, also an additional Floodgate, another Road to protect yourself from Storm, Black Rose Dragon, Icarus Attack, that kind of thing. Double Fossil Dyna to stop the unfair decks. Double Snowman Eater to just give you defense in the aggro mirrors and also count towards waters for your Miracle Fusion if your opponent is keen on boarding in Crows. And then 1 Banisher, which I actually think is really good. I think more decks should just start playing Banisher, because decks like Diva Zombies, decks like Fairies can really struggle with this card. So I think this card's fantastic. I think it's a great side deck choice. And I think this list looks solid. The only thing that's kind of weird is the extra deck. Get some more extra deck cards, my guy. I guess he doesn't need to, or now he can, now that he won money from the tournament. I should shout out this player's name. Hold up. This is, oh my god, I'm gonna butcher this. I want to say Yuhang Lee. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I'm American. Congrats on top 4 at the 2K tournament at, I think, Big Boys Games in North Carolina. All right, third place. Next, third place. This is the list that I'm probably going to clickbait, because this list looks fire. This list looks really, really cool. It's been a while since we've seen these sort of like normal Lightsworn looking lists, but this is a very aggressive looking version. You've got this tech Junk Synchron, which I'm in love with. This is such a cool tech in this deck, because it gives you access to things like Catastor or Arcanite Magician, just powerful cards that you wouldn't normally have access to. And also, it's another powerful card you can mill over with your Lightsworns that you can get back with Monster Reincarnation. That gives you kind of a 1-card synchro, which is pretty strong. You can also have turns where you Junk Synchron, bring back Plague, make 2 synchros if you have 2 bodies in play, for example. It's such a solid inclusion. This is a very aggressive looking list. You have triple Wolf, of course, triple Raikou. So you're looking to pop the back row, potentially mill a Wolf, and then just shove damage. Double Jane, also very good in the meta game. Jane can attack over Hamster, and it can also attack over Sirocco. Those are 2 of the premier monsters in the format. Jane is just really solid. It's also really good into decks like Gladiator Beasts, which I heard were very, very popular at this event. Because he had 2 Janes, he has an easy time attacking into things like Laquari. Note that Jane doesn't activate, doesn't start a chain, so they can't War Chariot the effect to gain damage. This card is just straight up stronger than every Gladiator Beast monster in the deck. At best, you're running over a monster and then they have to crash another monster, so you get a 2-for-1. At worst, you run into a battle trap, but that's still really solid. I mean, especially given everything else. There are a few cards that are cut here that I think are kind of interesting. He's not playing the Sarks in the main, maybe on account of space. I noticed he has a Smashing Ground, and I don't think Smashing Ground is a bad choice for Lightsworn. I've actually played it in the past, and I've had, honestly, good results with it, especially in the Wolf versions. When you're looking to just shove for damage, it's nice. It's nice to have that extra piece of just spot removal, get rid of their thing, and then finish off their life points. But I don't know if it's better than Sark in the main. Like, I feel like you could side the Smashing and then main the Sark, but I don't know. It's a marginal change. It's not really that big of a difference. The deck looks really solid. The main deck looks really solid. It's all good cards. And there's also no Cold Wave. That was another thing I was thinking. There's no Cold Wave. But if you have Rhoda, if you have Smashing Ground, stuff like this, Brain Control, sometimes Cold Wave can be awkward on your push turns. Sometimes you need to have your spell and traps active as well. So yeah, Cold Wave also shuts off your own Threatening Roar, which this deck is keen on using. I do think Threatening Roar is in a really great spot metagame-wise, especially if you have a lot of ways to convert off of it. And the Lightsworn deck definitely has ways to convert off of it. If you have a monster that mills 3 cards, and let's just say your mill's kind of underwhelming. Like, let's say you summon Lila and you're like, you mill 3 and it's like kind of mid. If you have Threatening Roar, not only does it make it hard for your opponent to set back row into your Lila, but it gives you another 3 mills, another shot at hitting Wolf. And the difference between 3 and 6 mills is usually the difference between winning and losing the game with this type of deck. So Threatening Roar just gives you those extra 3 mills. It's kind of like a Needlebug's Nest with upside. It can also protect your monster for the Celestia drop. There's another thing that I was thinking. You can Threatening Roar, protect a Lila, and then on your turn summon Chunk Synchron, and then Synchron to Arcanite and blow up their board. So it's yet another way with this tech Chunk Synchron, which I think is just super fantastic tech, to convert into like a field nuke after you've protected yourself from that turn. Your opponent overextends into Threatening Roar, etc., and then you get them with either Black Rose or Arcanite or whatever. Sideboard looks pretty interesting. Shield Crush, protecting their own Raikos in deck from Nobleman, but still electing to play them as a way to get through defensive monsters. Lightning Vortex, a way to clear stuff like Christia or Swarm decks, Drago, etc. Royal Oppression, this makes sense in these like hyper aggro versions of Lightsworn. You literally just want to like mill a wolf and set an oppression. That's pretty much the game plan in a lot of matchups, especially against like Glads. Can't really beat this card. It's just nasty, especially because a lot of other decks also are going to be citing out their spell and trap removal versus you once they see you're on triple Threatening Roar. Spell and trap removal is not the best against Threatening Roar. I mean, it's okay. Like Dust Tornado, you can hit in the end phase, but are you really going to be like setting a Dust Tornado into them potentially having Lila and getting free pluses on you? They don't have to set the Threatening Roar until you have no back row, basically. So yeah, it's pretty bad. Extra deck is cool. You got the Junk Warrior, of course. Very powerful card. And congratulations to this player. Let me get their name. Hold up. I have their names on my phone. Congratulations to Michael Boyd for placing in 3rd place. I've heard that name before. I wonder where. I think Michael Boyd is a powerful duelist from what I remember. I don't know if I'm remembering correctly, but I think Michael Boyd has some accolades. This is a very solid deck list. I like it a lot. Cool stuff. I'll definitely be playing this on the channel in the coming days. Okay, next, 2nd place, we have Blackwings. This is a really cool list too. This is showing some stuff that we haven't really seen from Blackwings in a really long time, which is triple main deck Book of Moon. I love Book of Moon. I found it to be one of the best cards in the format in Fairy deck. In Blackwings, it's interesting. I think it's strong, obviously, with Shura. It's very strong there. And he's got double value to make sure he can take advantage of the Shura battle thing. It's also really strong with Bora and Armed Wing when you're just looking to deal a bunch of pierce damage. He likes Book of Moon so much, he's elected to include a pseudo 4th copy in Enemy Controller. Enemy Controller has some hidden synergies in this deck where you can like Blizzard, bring back a guy, Enemy Controller, sack the guy, take their monster, synchro with it, etc. It kind of acts as like a 3rd Brain Mind, but it also kind of acts as like a 4th Book of Moon because you can attack into something, switch it to defense with Enemy Controller, and then get your Shura effect or your Bora Pierce or whatever. I actually think Enemy Controller is really good tech in these sort of like pure Blackwing decks, and I think we're going to definitely see more of it moving forward. He's also main decking Mind Control, which I think is a busted card, and I think this deck definitely should be considering main decking it. The trap lineup is also sick. He's got all the best traps, the 9 best, and then he's got Phoenix Wing Windblast in the slot that's normally Royal Oppression. I actually love Phoenix Wing in this deck. I think it's really good, especially when you have double value. You have like just a little bit of extra cards you might want to discard. I just think it's just a really solid tempo card that this deck could definitely take advantage of. Every time I've played this card in Blackwings, I've been very impressed. The sideboard is interesting. Triple deck dev for fairies, of course, and for quick draw. Royal Oppression, Skill Drain, one of each, not wanting to brick on them by citing multiples of either, and then one Light Mirror, same thing, kind of just like 3 different floodgates. One is good enough when you draw it, kind of thing. I don't know. I'm kind of mixed on this. I'm gonna be honest. I think deck dev is not as good without Grepher, obviously, because you just don't have that many ways to make it live on the first turn. So I don't think it's like, while I don't think it's bad, I think deck dev is an incredibly broken and unfair and unfun card to play against. I think it's just significantly worse without Grepher. So playing the full 3, like, when are you ever boarding in all 3? I don't really see a time when you're boarding in all 3, except maybe against fairies. But against fairies, I feel like Light Mirror is just better because this stops like their effects, which is what you care about. If you deck dev fairies too and they just drop a Christia on you, it can feel pretty bad if you don't have your negation. So I think deck dev is maybe not the card that should be 3 of. Maybe Light Mirror should be 2 and then deck dev should be 2, but it's marginal changes. System down over Cyber Dragon. I do like this because oftentimes your Cyber Dragon will kind of rot in your hand and then they'll just OTK you with a Machina Fortress. System down can at least clear the Machina Fortress out of the graveyard from the Lightstorm Machina decks, and it can also clear machine monsters in play. So it kind of does this like 2-for-1 thing that Cyber Dragon doesn't really do. Also, Cyber Dragon can conflict with Royal Oppression, which is something that you want to board in against machine decks. So I can see why he wants to go for System Down. Now, that being said, the life point cost on System Down is very real. So, I don't know. It's an interesting choice to play System Down over Cyber Dragon. I don't know if I would do it. I think the main reason he's done it is because he wanted the 15th extra deck slot for his 3rd Armed Wing. I think that's the main reason you would go with System Down over Cyber Dragon here. Because generally speaking, Cyber Dragon's pretty fucking good in Black Wings. It's like one of the better cards you can board in. Yeah, it's a little bit awkward with multiple Sirocco, but you can usually side out a Sirocco, side in 2 Cyber Dragons and be fine. My Body is a Shield, of course, protect yourself from traps, spells, that kind of thing. Neospatian Grand Mole is the only way this deck can attack over Consecrated Light, which is interesting. But that being said, this deck does have triple Book of Moon, so it has a lot of ways to deal with Consecrated Light plus Royal Decree. Maybe deal with is the wrong phrase there, but you can book the Consecrated, then make a synchro. It is awkward, but it is a way that you have enough ways to deal with it, I think, between the 3 books and the Grand Mole. Consecrated would beat this list up, though. Like, no lie. No cap. You just summon a Consecrated, and you're just like, fuck. Draw book or lose. Double DD Crow. This helps versus Pot of Avarice versus Zombies, which is an annoying matchup, honestly, for Black Wings. I feel like every time I play Black Wings, the matchup I want to play the least is versus Zombies. So having double DD Crow definitely helps, and having the knock also helps. I was talking to ProStorm recently, and ProStorm said something about knock, which was really interesting to me. He said, statistically speaking, the optimal number of noblemans is 2 plus mind control or 3 noblemans, because that way you see them as early as possible, because your opponent's going to be setting their set cards early, and then later in the game, they're not going to be setting as much. So you want to see knock as early as possible, and it's not a great late game top deck when you've gotten into like aggro fights or once your opponent's resolved like a Caius or something. So he says you want to see it as early as possible, which means you do want to play more copies of it. Maybe there's some overlap with deck dev, so you don't really need the second one, but I think there was like some statistics he had run where having 2 knocks plus mind control is like the best number apparently. And then of course double dust to clear back row. Solid list, pretty straightforward stuff. I mean, nothing really to say about the extra deck other than there's no Chimera Tech because there's no Cyber Dragon. Good stuff too. Hold up, let me get the name for y'all. Vincent Casello on his 2nd place finish. Really solid. Really solid 2nd place finish. You'll note that in the top 4, I think Black Wings looks like it has a pretty solid matchup against the rest of the top 4. So it made sense that he made it this far. And then the 1st place list, of course. Ryan Prescott, aka Raikoko7, aka RBET winner? Question mark. I think Raikoko has won an RBET. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know. Comment section below. He either won it or he was in the finals, or he's just an insanely powerful player. He's just one of the strongest players to ever do it. This is a really interesting list. This is his Vayu Turbo list. Turbo in air quotes. He's got double hamster. Normally this deck only plays one. Looks like he wanted the two. Didn't up the Caius count though. He just wants extra access to Raikou. Interesting because he's not playing charge. Now, I understand not playing charge because you don't want to give your opponent information on what your set monster is or what's in your hand or whatever. But I feel like Charge the Light Brigade is pretty fucking powerful in this deck, so it's a little bit interesting that he's decided not to play it. I'm really curious to hear his reasoning on why he's not playing that, but he is playing the second hamster. He's got double Armageddon, double Dark Refer, plus Rhoda to set up for his value plays. Necrogarna, Plague, Gores in the main, something we don't always see. It's back and forth in the main in this deck. He's got the Gale, of course. He's got the Card Trooper, the Dark Armed, the Burial, all the best cards. Brain Control, Burial, Dark Armed really shine in this deck because you have a lot of different ways to utilize those cards in effective manners. One Book of Moon in the main, triple D-Prison, double Bottomless. D-Prison Raikou is like one of the strongest starts in the game, so I'm not surprised to see that he is electing to max out on that start, basically. Having a lot of ways to set Raikou turn one, and then, of course, the maximum number of D-Prisons that you can play. Double Bottomless. This deck does struggle with monsters 2400 and above, so you got to have Bottomless to remove them. Mirror Force Torrential, same thing. Only one Royal Oppression. This makes sense. If the field is mostly like Blackwings, Vayu Turbo, and Frogs, which I think he probably predicted, then only one Royal Oppression in the main makes sense. That being said, I did hear the field was a lot of Glads, so I don't know. Maybe he would have wanted the second Royal Oppression if that was the field. This deck struggles a lot with Frog Monarchs, so he's got triple Pulling the Rug in the side, as well as Solemn Judgment in the main. I like that. I think this deck does really, really struggle versus Frogs. That matchup is not a fun one, in my opinion. Being on the receiving end of the Frog matchup when you're trying to set a Raikou is just like really miserable. You pretty much have to have Pulling the Rug to defend your Raikou, or else your deck's just not going to function. That's really the only way you can approach that opening setup in a way that's not going to make you feel fucking terrible, you know. Second Royal Oppression on the side, Mind Control on the side. Mind Control is really strong in this deck, obviously. We saw it have a really solid finish from Spooner Boy, I think it was, in RBET recently. So, yeah, I do think Mind Control is pretty slept on in this deck, potentially even mainable. Vanity's Fiend, double Cyber Dragon, double Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer. This card's very good. It protects you from crows, and it also does a pretty good job when you have a shitload of spot removal, which is what Ryan is overloading on here in his deck list. Extra deck's pretty straightforward. The only thing you'll notice is that there's only 2 Armed Wings. In place of that, he has either Thought Ruler or Armory Arm. I think Armory Arm is absolutely necessary for this deck. It is one of the few ways this deck can make OTK pushes without Vanity's Fiend into Gores. And then I do think that Thought Ruler Archfiend comes up more than the 3rd Armed Wing, so it makes sense. The only thing he can maybe consider is like cutting the Cyber Dragons and the Chimera Tech to make room for that 3rd Armed Wing. But I don't know if that's really worth it. You're probably losing percentages in a lot of matchups by cutting Cyber Dragon, because I think Cyber Dragon's just fantastic. This deck list looks solid. All of these deck lists look solid. I'm really excited to try out specifically the 3rd place Lightsworn deck list with the Junk Synchron. This looks fucking fire. And thank you guys. Thank you to Big Boy Games and the Edison Club for passing me the deck list and letting me cover this. So I'll see you guys in the next vid. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Smash like, subscribe. Peace out.